Hey guys. So this is my session. I decided to do a couple of sample sites, one headless and one just straight up Drupal 8 to get a comparison. And yeah, I'm going to share that with you guys today. This is me. I'm a Drupal developer at Chapter 3. I've been there for about 4.5 years. Last couple of years I've been mostly working in Drupal 8, which I enjoy a lot. Had a couple of projects with React. Most notably, we ported a client's comment system from Discuss over to a custom solution, and then contributed that back as the React comments module. Let's see. I like kitties and puppies. Okay, so the sites took a little longer than I expected, and so my slides kind of suck, as evidenced by the fact that the GIF isn't even running. So sorry about that. Oh, there it goes. Okay, now I really feel the shame. So apologies for that. So anyway, let's get started. So headless is a term that, as far as I know, was coined by the Drupal community. It basically means that you're using Drupal as exclusively a backend. And so instead of using our rendering system, templating, PHP template, or Twig, we use a decoupled JavaScript framework. So the Drupal site just exposes an API which is consumed by the head, which is a separate application. So why go headless? A big one is, so you're going to notice a lot of these really apply to like kind of enterprise level sites and apps. But anyway, separation of concerns. With a separate front end and back end, you can have two specialized teams. So we did actually notice this when we were building the React comments module. I was responsible for the front end, and I had a coworker who was in parallel working on the back end API. And it was really nice to be able to, work completely separately, and then it was satisfying to see it come together at the end and actually work. As long as you agree on your API contract to begin with, you can really effectively work in parallel. So that's one reason why you might want to go headless. Another one that we unfortunately see a fair amount is that it means that you're less committed to Drupal. I'm sure you guys are aware that the transition from Drupal 7 to 8 was a little bit rough. So a lot of big organizations noticed that, and so they seem to like that you can commit to your front end, and then that will be there whether or not the Drupal side kind of works out or not. And you can kind of understand, for a large organization, they see something like React and they see that it's backed by Facebook, and that inspires confidence, whereas, kind of the dip in adoption of Drupal 8 was maybe worrisome. Microservices. So having a decoupled front end means that your different UI components can grab data from different sources. So that means that you can separate your back end out into microservices if need be, and this can lead to even more separation of concerns. Again, this is probably most useful for large organizations where they have a really large engineering team, but you can have a front-end team, and then your back-end can be separated out into different back-end teams, and each of them can be responsible for a different part of the application. So this can theoretically help with velocity, accountability, and planning. Okay, so app-like UI. So this is what I believe the best reason for decoupling is. If you've ever used React, you know that being able to isolate your logic into components really makes it scalable and enjoyable to work with for doing app-like stuff. let's see. So if your app has a global state that changes in real time and is reused across multiple pages, if your individual UI components have multiple states and change between them often, or if your UI components have a heavy degree of interaction with each other, you'll be loving React. And probably other JavaScript frameworks. I'm most versed in React. I've done a little bit of Vue, but I haven't really touched stuff like Ember or Angular, so can't really speak to those. And then last one is performance. So there's no denying that React or that JavaScript frameworks can outperform Drupal, mostly because after your first page load, they're just grabbing pure data. There's no more, every React or every Drupal page load is going to be a full HTML page, even with something like Varnish in front of it. You're still sending a lot more data over the wire. So with stuff like code splitting and server-side rendering, React can really outperform Drupal. But the reason I have the asterisk up there is because I feel like it's kind of a misconception that you need that much performance. I feel like with stuff like if you run your Drupal 8 site on a quality host like Pantheon or Acquia, and you run Varnish and a CDN in front of it, you're really you're going to have a performance site. And so optimizing that further purely for performance reasons, I feel like is chasing diminishing returns. Okay, so what is React? React is a component-based front-end JavaScript framework. So basically, you break your UI down into components. How many of you guys are familiar with React? Everyone. Most people. I won't go over it. Well, actually, I have some slides in here, so I'll go over it a little bit. So it handles the view layer only, and state can be per component or passed down as props. So my favorite example is the HTML select list. So we're all used to dealing with HTML components. And as you can see, the select list, you just pop it in there and you're used to it working in a certain way. But if you think about it, it's got certain state. It's either open or closed, and it's got a selected option. So React lets you build your own custom components that have state on a per component basis, and then you can use them just like HTML elements in your code. So I've got a couple examples here. At its most basic level, this is a React component. It's just a snippet of HTML. Technically, it's JSX, which is kind of a JavaScript XML representation of HTML. And so you really don't notice that it's different from HTML, except for that instead of using class, you have to use class name, because class is a restricted keyword in JavaScript. But on its most basic level, that is all a React component is, a little snippet of HTML. Slightly more complex is basically templating. So you're used to this with like Twig or a PHP template. So basically what we're doing is we're passing properties into the React component and then using them inside of it. So that example component is this one here. And you can see that we're using it basically just like an HTML element, except we named it what we choose. And then lastly, you have more complicated examples where you have some initial state, you have some functionality represented by this toggle color method here. And then in your little HTML snippet, you can use functions or methods in this case to change the state. So does anyone have any questions on React? No. Okay, cool. All right, so React is pretty sweet. Agreed. what is Drupal 8 good at? So there have been a lot of improvements from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 from an architecture perspective. There have been improvements from a developer experience perspective as well, and there have also been steps backwards from a developer experience perspective. We actually had an old employee come into the office asking us, because we'd had some Drupal 8 experience, this was probably 2 years ago, what's so great about Drupal 8? Why is it better than Drupal 7, if at all? And the only thing that we could really come up with was developer experience, caching API, and configuration management. And at the time, I was a little bit ashamed that that's all we could come up with. But now that I've been working with Drupal 8 for a bit longer, I realized that those are actually huge improvements. Specifically, the caching API. Well, okay, actually, configuration management. I think you guys, if you've worked with Drupal 7, if you've worked with a features site, you're used to hell. It's really unpleasant. Whereas I haven't had any problems with configuration management. I've heard people complain, but I've never had any issues. It's just put it in the code, pop it up there, and everything is in sync. It's really a beautiful thing, in my opinion. The cache API is also really wonderful. It will only benefit certain kinds of sites. If you are running kind of like a brochure site where it doesn't change very often, and when it does change, you are able to clear the entire site cache without risking bringing anything down, then probably the cache API isn't gonna be helping you that much. But if you are, for instance, a publisher, if you run like a news site, cache tags are a godsend. So basically in Drupal 8 you can cache content and it will be tagged, and then those tags will bubble up to the page level anywhere that they're used on the site. So if I create a piece of news content and then put it in a view, that view will be tagged with that content and every other piece of content in the view. The page that it's on will be tagged, and anywhere else that's referenced on the site will be tagged. And then if I update that content and save it, all those cache tags are invalidated, and so all of those pages will be regenerated, but your site cache can keep chugging along. So if you use that with something like the Acquia Purge module, which supports cache tags with Varnish, you can really build some really full-featured, large performance sites. And then cache contexts are also, have you guys heard of cache tags and cache contexts? The cache contexts are really great too if you're building a site with logged in users. So cache contexts I can use to cache something. And so this is really on the render array level. You can add cacheability metadata to any part of your site. Sometimes it'll take a little custom code, but I can cache parts of my site per role, per exact set of permissions, per country. There's really a lot you can do with it if you're building that sort of site. And this is stuff that you could do in Drupal 7, and we have, but it's really unpleasant. We have a site that's like a, what is it called? A knowledge base, like customer service site, and it uses logged in users, and it can be this sort of thing, like block level caching for users with different permissions and roles can be a real pain in the ass. So cache contexts are awesome. Cool, so enough dilly-dallying. Let me show you the sites that I built. Or I will try to, if I can figure this out. Okay, so I built two little example sites, and I tried to build them in a way that would kind of showcase the the benefits of both technologies, or both stacks, I guess. I wouldn't say that I did a great job at showcasing, in particular, React, mostly because what I think that it's really good at is complex app-like behavior, and obviously, you know, in a couple days, I'm not going to whip up a site that has like complex app-like behavior, but I did my best. So this is the Drupal 8 site. It's got some kitties on it. It's got some paragraphs. I built 2 or 3 paragraph types, and then I built this little map page here using the leaflet module. You know, it's nothing like super complex, but considering it took like, I think, 5 hours. Well, okay, that's ugly. Sorry. I think it's pretty impressive what you can get done with Drupal 8. Probably part of this is because I have more experience with Drupal 8 than React, so that I'm sure affected the amount of time it took. But anyway, so this is the Drupal 8 site again, and then oopsies. And then here is the headless site, puppies. So it uses, again, it's pulling the paragraphs from the kitties site. And then there's some bugs in here, for which I apologize. And then, so I did at the end, I added this little bit to kind of sample what app-like behavior, what I mean when I say that. So I added a little like feature, and you can see that when you like a puppy, you can see that its marker changes on the map, which is something that if you can do it in Drupal, obviously, but if you imagine how you would do that in Drupal, it would be messy. It would be kind of unpleasant. So you'd add a JavaScript to the page. You would add event listeners to each of these little buttons, and then you would, every time they were clicked, you might search the DOM for these nodes and then swap out the icon. And then I can show you. Maybe we don't want to get too much into code, but in React, it's a lot more pleasant and a lot more maintainable. The state is maintained in the store, and then maybe here. Let me see if I can find it quickly. So we have a puppy teaser component, and then we just have an on-click right on this SVG here. Sorry, the SVG gets a little ugly. But so we just add a class and a property for whether it's liked or not, and then you can just change the HTML classes based on that. So hopefully you can see how this kind of approach is less unpleasant and more maintainable down the road. Okay. Let's see here. Cool. So, big decision when you're building a headless site is what are you going to use for the API? So, for the React comments module, we used custom REST plugins. The REST module has been pulled into core, and so it'll do stuff like out of the box. You can enable certain endpoints, and you can see. So, for instance, here this is the REST module out of the box, looking at the kitty content type, and you can see it gives you pretty much everything you need, and a lot more. So that's really cool. It's really fast. The reason I did not use the out-of-the-box REST module is because of this. There's a lot of linking. So each content type that you hit, it'll give you any reference entities will be given as a target ID, which I get it. It's good for if you're making an API for someone external to use. Like it's possible to build pretty much anything with this. The problem with it for me is that I feel like it can get really messy making a ton of requests from the front end, and it's not performant. For instance, if I go to the landing page and I have a paragraph field that references 3 paragraphs, and each paragraph references, actually one of the things I don't love about paragraphs is that you often have to build a container paragraph that then references more paragraphs. So in my example, I have a columns paragraph that references the endorsements, images, or text. So you're getting 3 deep, and that would be really unpleasant to do if you were trying to use the REST API like this, getting target IDs, finding those endpoints, hitting them up, and then trying to compose it. So instead, I went with custom plugins, which is pretty cool. It lets you export some configuration, gives you some stuff out of the box like routing, permissions, and so basically what you end up with is a plugin. Are you guys familiar with Drupal 8 plugins? Okay, so a plugin in Drupal 8 is it's a class. It's a class that has a certain contract. It's expected to be used in a part of the site. So you have certain methods that you have to provide, and they're supposed to return certain things. So in this context, a REST plugin, it has to have methods for the HTML verbs that you want to expose. So I only used get for this site. So basically, I've got a PHP class with an annotation that tells Drupal that it's a REST plugin, and then one method that responds to the GET request on that route. So probably more clear if I just show it to you. Okay, so these are my resources. I made a custom module, and then basically all you have to do is source plugin REST resource. You pop some classes in there with some annotations. So here's our landing page resource.
Can you make the font bigger?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't think about that earlier. I don't know if I can, though.
You can use your mouse to...
Oh, I can just... yeah, there we go. Smart, thank you. Okay, how's that? Is that...
That's so cool.
That's good? Okay. Cool, so here's our annotation. Annotations are a little bit weird. I think they're cool. You just specify some metadata about the class. So for instance, here we're specifying our endpoint, and then we just have this one get method. Let me make sure that that's true. Okay, so this is a little helper function. So reference entities, nested reference entities are a pain in the ass. There's no getting around it. So what I did was I made a little helper function that will take a paragraphs field and return all of the nested paragraphs, which I then call recursively here. So you can see in this, so we created a data array, which then gets serialized when you pass it to the resource response. And so you can see we can specify our own keys, only pass the data we need, and we can do some pretty powerful stuff like pass image styles, and then fill out all of our paragraph data, so we can just shoot off one request and get everything we need. Should we No, I don't know. Maybe we should take a look at the, nah, whatever. Okay, so moving on. Okay. JSON API is also cool. It's pretty similar to the REST API, except you can, so you can specify what you want with URL query parameters. So you can do some pretty complex stuff, like getting lists of content, filtering based on field values. Your URLs get messy, but it's pretty cool. I thought this was what I was going to use, but I just felt like the REST plugins were the best solution for recursively populating the paragraphs. So that's why I went with that. But here's what you get back from the JSON API. Pretty similar to the REST. You can see there's links to relevant stuff. If you did want to compose and use requests in your front-end application to build your page, they provide links to make it easier. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. So setup was pretty quick. Create React app is amazing. I didn't really use React a whole lot before Create React app, but dealing with Webpack and Babel isn't my favorite thing. I don't know if I should admit that or not, but anyway, Create React app is great. 6 minutes, it'll spin up a whole site for you with some example content, and you can just start hacking away at it. For Drupal, setting up a Drupal site can be a pain in the ass, Drupal 8, especially if you want it to be managed by Composer. So one of my coworkers outlined a bunch of steps in our wiki on how to build a Drupal 8 site, how to get it started and get it pushed up to Pantheon using Composer, and that was great. So I just built a little script that automated it. You're welcome to use it. It works for me. Pull request welcome. I guess that's how I'll say it. So getting set up on hosting was also kind of a breeze. Granted, I've used both Heroku and Pantheon before, so I had all the command line tools set up. But getting it set up and pushed up to a demo site took 7 minutes for each of them. So that's pretty impressive, I thought. So performance. This is so I passed both of those dev sites into web page speed tests with no thought to optimizing for performance. So this is just what you get if you just build your site, push it up. So for the headless one, they had a problem with my static content. I don't know exactly. It's probably the images aren't returning the right cache headers. But you can see other than that, it's pretty quick. Actually, if I show you the actual test, you can see, the speed index it doesn't like because of the F grade, I think, but document complete in less than 2 seconds. That's, pretty much all you really need. And then 0.3 seconds on return view. If we go back to the site, so you'll see they're both pretty snappy. You click around and it loads pretty much instantly for the Drupal side. And then let's see, what was it? Gradient something or other. So the React side is maybe a little more sexy because there's no page flash, and it's almost instantaneous. see. And then the D8 site was also pretty good out of the box. I don't know why it doesn't seem to care about caching static content on the site, but whatever. Cool. Editorial experience. You're gonna lose some stuff if you go headless. So for these example sites, I created a landing page, and editing it is pretty much the same for both sites. You can go rearrange the paragraphs, change the text, blah, blah, blah. You do it through the Drupal 8 backend. And probably that's how I'd recommend doing it for the most part. What you're going to lose is stuff like contextual links and content previews. And when I say lose, I mean you lose the out-of-the-box stuff. So, of course, you can build your own, and we've talked to clients that are like, oh, that's no big deal. We'll just build our own content previewing route, and that's fine. But time is money, so it's a consideration. Developer experience. So I was. I got a little bored of the React stuff by the end because the site's really simple. So the fact that it took maybe 4 times as long to build the same thing in React, I didn't love that. I also made the choice to use Redux. So there's a lot of extra wiring involved. I don't know if you guys know Redux, but it's like a state management system. People recommend not to use it initially until your site grows to the level where you need it. I feel like if you feel like your site needs React, probably you should use some sort of state management just from the get-go, because you don't want to be doing all of that refactoring. My opinion, probably I'm wrong. I don't know, but yeah. So I use Redux. Another good one is MobX. MobX kind of fits more with my how my brain works. It's probably because I've done some object-oriented stuff in PHP land, but it basically it lets you use decorators on your components to specify. It seems it's just more of an object-oriented approach, which I like. And then the Drupal site, it took me 5 hours. So like, I don't know, no problems. I don't mind theming in Drupal 8. So yeah, the developer experience, it was pretty good either way. I feel like if I'd really been like testing the limits of React or using it for something that I was really good at, it would have been probably more enjoyable. But yeah, here's the time breakdown. You can see that probably, I mean, again, I have more experience with Drupal 8, so it's going to take less time. But I think there definitely is an extra time investment if you decide to go headless. So my recommendation would be make sure that you really need to, make sure it's really beneficial to your business goals or your client's business goals before making that decision. And that's all I got. Questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
The resource response, is that like caching built in?
It does. It does.
The cache tags.
So let's see.
In your example, does that image get bubbled up in the way?
That is a good question. I think I might have needed to do some more. So you can. I think what you can do is you can use a method on pretty much any entity in Drupal called get cacheability metadata, and I think that what you'd need to do is pass that into the resource response, and then it would work. We have a couple of bigger client sites, and I think the React Comments module uses cache tags as well. Sure.
And then a follow-up to that is the invalidation piece for the headless front-end framework.
So it'll invalidate if you update the content, and then the endpoint will be different.
Okay.
So your endpoints are what get cached.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's actually the JSON response is.
So your front end app doesn't get.
So your front end app is going to hit the endpoint every time. It's going to pull in that data every time, and that's how you can get that like interactiveness.
So it doesn't get cached itself. No sort of
well,
proxy in front of the front end app.
Well, so you can do that too, but what that'll do is it'll cache the actual JavaScript file, and then you're still going to be making the calls. So like. Yeah, the front end performance of loading the JavaScript into the browser is going to be faster, but then it's going to make those calls every single time, and then the endpoints are what's going to be cached.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So we played around with not fully headless, but even just a few components or something like that, and saw some issues with being. Indexing JavaScript rendered content. Google seems to do it great. But have you seen anything with SEO around rendering through React or Vue?
Oh, interesting. I haven't really looked at it from that perspective. I've heard that it's not really something you have to worry about anymore because Google. So what were your issues that you were having?
Well, we saw Google can render the JavaScript and it gets all the content and it does it great. Bing put out a couple of blog posts that they were working on a JavaScript render years ago. But some blog posts and testing and stuff seems to point to they never fully implemented it.
Interesting.
We ran a couple of tests just hitting Bing like. You could do the site colon and then look for a specific string of text. And it seems to have trouble finding content rendered through those frameworks, but
interesting.
There's not really a whole lot out there. And Microsoft doesn't really talk about it much.
Yeah.
But since they also bought Yahoo doesn't do it.
Good to know. Well, I would think that if you did do server-side rendering, that would probably solve that issue. Of course. Server-side rendering always sounds easier than it probably is. I haven't experimented with it yet. So
yeah, we did look into doing some sort of initial like rendering of just raw content, kind of layering on top of that. But
yeah.
Just curious if you've heard any.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I didn't even know that. I didn't know that Bing would be an issue for that. So it's good to know. Yeah, thank you.
I don't know, because you're using sort of the same backend for both, but can you show what sort of the content editing is like for the headless site?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Okay, so what we want to do here is log in to, so we're going to log into kitties.dev. Is it whining at me for some reason? What happened? Where am I? Cool. Okay. And then. Okay. So we got our kitties and our puppies landing pages. So we're going to edit the puppies landing page. As was mentioned before, I didn't really concentrate on the caching stuff. So we're going to do a cache clear, but we'll move these around. In fact, why don't we put pups right in the middle? Save it. So if I'd done the extra steps for the cache tags, this should already, if I reloaded it, it would work. I did not do that. So we're going to have to clear cache. And now this should be cool. So you can see change the order. What do you think? Do you want to see anything else, or we can, let's see. I mean, so that's basically all there is to it. Is you go to, you find your content, make your changes, and then again, I think we'll have to. Oh, cool! It broke. Broke the layout. Yeah, but it worked as far as the content editing goes. So you can see it's not that bad, except if you're doing like let's see. You miss out on this kind of stuff, which is pretty useful, I think. Of course, you can build that in if you want, but again, more steps and more complication.
Under consideration, so you're not Drupal will continue to render the content, right? At the internal paths like node/12. You account for that so that your authors don't get confused.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hadn't really thought of that. I don't know.
The same domains, like the front end is the same domain, or is it a different?
That depends. You can set it up however you want. So in my example, we pushed to Heroku, so it's a different domain.
Right.
So you have to do the what is it, cross-origin resource sharing core stuff, which Drupal 8 makes pretty easy. But yeah, so you could have a separate API URL, or you could use some sort of proxy, and then I don't know if Drupal 8 has Rabbit Hole yet, but that would be an option if you really didn't want it to be accessible. I mean, probably if you were doing like just a backend, there probably wouldn't be any theming, so your content editors would probably quickly realize that they're not in the right place. And then probably also, you maybe wouldn't use like clean URLs, so like they would have to go to like node 4 or node 5 and stuff like that to actually find anything.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm going to add to that there's a Drupal distribution called Contenta, which sets up some API stuff as well. And I have installed it, and one of the things I noticed that there's something in there, I don't know what it is specifically, but it's got code in place that basically removes the public-facing side of the Drupal site. So
cool.
If you do try to go to like node/1, it would really just take you to the page.
I almost mentioned Contenta, but I had no idea about that. So
I don't know how it does it, but
I mean, I imagine you could do something like override the node routes.
Yeah.
I mean, something like that.
I think it does, and it's like, I don't recall exactly, but it's maybe if you go to the view page for an entity, it shows you like the JSON API representation of that entity. If you look at it, you can.
Yeah. Daniel is an
slick.
incredibly smart dude, so I'm not surprised that it's slick. Anyone else? Alrighty. Well, I hope you guys got something out of that.